Afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kendra Tankersley-Davis, so you might see Dr. Brenda Navarati's name in my little picture box. That is just, I'm using her laptop. So again, thank you for joining this session today. I want to start by prefacing that this is a very difficult topic. This is not an easy topic to discuss. There will be some sensitive information shared. So I ask that you just be patient with it, really try to receive the information. And if at any point in time you feel uncomfortable with the information that is being shared, it is more than okay to step away. It may trigger some personal feelings that you may have experienced or someone in your family. So let's get started. The objectives of today's meeting is that we are going to be developing an understanding and a clear definition of what the commercial sexual exploitation of children is. It is also known as CSEC. So you will hear me refer to it as CSEC, 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 but it is the entire definition is the commercial sexual exploitation of children. We're also going to discuss what puts children at risk. We're going to learn tactics that are used by sex traffickers in recruitment and retention of children for sex trafficking, have an understanding of interventions that can be used and how you can support this population in working through the stages of change. But more importantly, we're going to talk a lot about prevention. What is it we can do? Oftentimes people will feel powerless with this subject, but you don't have to. There is a lot that we can do. So let's get started. A few ground rules. This is going to be some very sensitive information and content. Let's be respectful of that. I will share stories of individuals that I have worked with over the years. So I please ask your confidentiality, and we have to respect various opinions. There are still some who are not understanding that this is a crime, that this is taking place, that it is happening in communities throughout the world. So we want to be respectful of everyone's opinion. A little bit about myself. I have worked in the area of social services with children from ages 3 to 25 for the last 17 years now, in particular in the area of human trafficking for about 15 years. So I've had the opportunity to work with various different people who have suffered various levels of trauma and help them work through recovery, healing, but also I do a lot of work in advocacy and prevention as well. What is CSEC? Commercial sexual exploitation of children is sexual activity involving a child in exchange of something for value, of a promise, or something to the child or another person. So it doesn't have to be money. I had a client that I worked with. She was about 15 years old, and she was in a group home type environment, and she had met a gentleman online and asked if he would take her to a community that she used to live in. And when she went to that community, she became very, to visit her friends. It was a former foster home she had been in. She visited her friends, and when it was time for her to come back to her where she was currently residing, he told her she had to engage in a sexual favor. So she performed the sexual act, and he brought her back to the place where she was residing. So it wasn't necessary, he didn't give her any money. The value was to her. Her value was to get back to her place where she was residing. So that would be considered commercial sexual exploitation of a child. He was an adult, she was a minor, and in order for her to get the right home that he had already promised her, she had to engage in a sexual act. The child is mistreated as a commercial or sexual object. And I want to be clear, it's not a choice. It is a form of violence against a child. It is violent behavior against a child, and it has very deep consequences. Human trafficking also involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain some type of labor or a sexual act. In the United States, the Polaris Project reports that in 2020, there were 10,836 victims of sex trafficking identified. I want to be clear in that number that I'm providing you. That number is really just talking about who was identified. This particular crime goes far more unidentified than it does identified. So this in the world of trafficking is a relatively low number. There are at least 200,000 youth who are at risk of commercial sexual exploitation annually within the United States, and the average age of entry is between 12 to 16 years old. Now, I don't want you to feel hopeless, or that, because you shouldn't, because Navajo Nation is actually doing quite a bit in this movement to move forward in protecting the beautiful community that they have. Recently, there was a white paper that reported the following statistics. There were 13% of trafficking victims were involved in sexual abuse. 90% of the sexual abuse was caused by a family member or a very close friend of the family. 8 and 9 perpetrators in the sexual abuse cases were adults. 33% were the caretaker's boyfriend, so maybe the mom's partner. 100% of the child's primary caretakers were aware of the situation, and we're going to talk about that further in this presentation. 2 out of 3 of the cases that were identified, there was an exchange of a sexual behavior for drugs. And the exchange of sex for money was 1 out of 3 people trying to just get basic living necessities. It might be water, it might be food, it could be clothing, just the basic things that we need to survive. Recent studies indicate that 70 to 90% of sexually exploited children have a history of child sexual abuse. And we're going to talk about that. Sexual abuse plays a very big part. When you look at victims and survivors of human trafficking, in particular sex trafficking, they have experienced some type of sexual abuse. And because this can bring a lot of confusion among children, they may not necessarily see being trafficked as a negative thing, as a bad thing, as something that is unusual or should not be happening. In a large number of the kids that I have worked with and young adults who have experienced sexual abuse, or trafficking, one of the things that they'll say, well, my uncle did it to me, so I might as well get paid for it. Or my dad or my stepdad or my grandfather or my neighbor, I was sexually abused to them and they told me I was really good at this, so why not sell it? They don't see that it is a negative and a bad thing because it's something that has historically been done to them, oftentimes making them feel that it is acceptable. What does child trafficking include? It includes street prostitution, which does take place, pornography, strip clubs, working in strip clubs, erotic or nude massage parlors, escort services, phone sex lines, private parties, massage parlors, gang-based prostitution, interfamilial pimping, and forms of internet-based exploitation. I want to take a little bit and talk about the gang-based prostitution. Gang-based trafficking is becoming really big now. It has over the last few years. It's a very, very lucrative business. It's become more lucrative than selling drugs or selling guns. They find it more beneficial to them to be able to sell a person repeatedly for vast amounts of money over selling drugs and gangs. And previously, prior to new laws being in place, it was also less offensive. You didn't get a lot of time, if any, if you were if you were arrested for pimping and pandering. Thank goodness the laws have changed and we're seeing a larger amount of time that people are getting for that. But also you have to think, gangs have a very significant infrastructure that makes trafficking very bit easier for them. You can identify gangs all over the country from whatever specific gang, and they have the substances, they have weapons, and they have the ability already to institute fear. And fear plays a very big base in trafficking and in particular in the sexual exploitation of children. They fear their perpetrator, they fear their trafficker to some degree because they know what they can do. They definitely know the possibilities of things that they can do, which makes them a lot more fearful. So gangs have that infrastructure established already, which allows them the opportunity to move their victims throughout the country. It's important. That is an important part of their business because clientele, for lack of a better word, they like new merchandise. I have actually heard traffickers refer to those that they are trafficking as their property or their merchandise. So they like to keep, new individuals in the different areas that they have engaging in trafficking. Internet-based exploitation has become very big too, and it's really increased. It's actually exploded during the pandemic. And you may ask yourself, why is that? Everyone was online. Everyone was online. We had our educational systems were online, and you had a large number of children online. Parents were online trying to work. All of these different things were taking place. One of the things that we saw happening in reference to children is predators were coming through their laptop and coming through the screens. And what they were doing is building and establishing relationships with these children, which we are going to talk a lot about later, and having these children engage in sexual activities with their younger siblings. And they were recording it. A child is not going to know, many adults may not know if their internet service or their laptop or their computer or their phone system had been hacked. How could you expect a 15-year-old or a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old to know that this has been occurring? Pathways to entry. There are a number of different ways that children can get involved in commercial sexual exploitation. One is parents selling their children. And it could be maybe the parent has a substance abuse disorder. Maybe they're doing it to get basic living expenses like food or housing or water or clothing. Those are things that happen. It could be the family culture. I worked with, one of my teams worked with a family where the family culture was to raise the children to be traffickers. So they were raised to be pimps and madams. And how we became involved in the case, my agency, was the victim. Through providing services to the victim, her trafficker was about 15 years old and she had been raised to traffic others. So it can go both ways. Violence, force, and kidnapping, I know that there's been a lot of discussion about that lately. That is usually the least likely way that children get involved in trafficking. One of the most predominant ways is seduction and coercion. Young girl meets a guy, he's her boyfriend, and he tells her how amazing she is. He grooms her, he makes her feel special. He takes her to eat, he buys her gifts. More importantly, he listens. He listens to what she has to say. He's there whenever she needs him. He provides an amazing amount of support for her. And in doing these things, he is well aware, and I want to also be clear, traffickers can be females as well, but in this instance, which is the most common, the boyfriend, he's well aware of what he's doing. He is working to identify her vulnerabilities so that when he's ready to take the next step with her, to get her to move into trafficking, move into selling herself, it's an easier sell. And one of the things that is common that they will tell her is, I did all these things for you. I listened to you, I bought you this, I bought you that, I took you to eat, and now you can't do this one thing for me? And the one thing might be, I just want you to sleep with my best friend. He just thinks you're so beautiful. I just want to share you with him because you're so special. And then from there, the next thing she knows, she has moved all the way down the line where she is working and being abused and battered. This does not take a long time. This type of coercion, I've seen it take anywhere from 3 days to a month, maybe 2 months, but it's usually within weeks, because one of the things traffickers know is how to identify the most vulnerable. They're looking for the vulnerability in a child, and they use that to their advantage. If a child shares with their boyfriend, my parents get on my nerves, they won't let me do this, or they won't let me do that, and they don't do anything for me, or my mom is too wrapped up into her boyfriend to worry about me. If those conversations are starting to take place, what that trafficker is doing is banking that information. He is keeping that information and holding that information so that he could use it at a different time to get what he wants and for his coercion. So that is one of the most prominent and well-known ways that we see our children get involved in trafficking. There's also the false opportunity or advertising for modeling or being in the performing arts or dancing. That happens, as well, where young people may feel like, hey, I want to be a model. I'm really great. I know this is what I want to do. However, it's not the reality, or my parents don't want to support me in doing that, where your trafficker may say, hey, I'm able to do this for you. I can make this happen for you. This is what I can help you with. And then you move forward and there you are. You're not acting, you're not modeling, and you're not dancing. You are being sold. Or maybe you think you're going to dance on a Broadway show and instead it's at a strip club. And before you know it, you've gone down the rabbit hole. Also, false opportunities of employment. That happens as well. There was in a very nice neighborhood, a high school that had, which we've all probably seen, if you go around like convenience stores or gas stations or grocery stores, they'll have the list where you can pull the tag for employment. And someone had put these lists advertising for high school students and middle school students. They could get a job and earn money over the summer, when it really was a trafficking ring. They were soliciting for trafficking. And it was actually a young boy, a teenage boy, who called, and he felt concerned that this didn't make sense. So he actually reported it to his mom, and law enforcement was able to break up this ring. Peer recruitment happens frequently. I worked with a young adult with a client when she was 16. It was her friend who said to her, hey, let's go to a party, let's have fun. Oh, wait, let's go walk to the park first, then we'll go to the party. And when it was time to go to the party, my client's friend said, hey, you know what? I have to go do something for my mom. These two people we met up with, why don't you go with them to the party and I'll meet you there later? And though my client said she felt a little bit uncomfortable, they seemed really cool. There didn't seem to be a problem. So she went ahead and went to the party with them. And before they go to the party, the gentleman, who was an adult male, said, oh, wait, we got to stop by this house. I need to drop off this car. So they stop at a house not too far from the city where she was from. And as you may think, they never left the house. They held her there for about a week, where she was trafficked. This was not in some seedy, low down, not good neighborhood. It was in a decent neighborhood, a family-oriented neighborhood. They had a house in the middle of this neighborhood, and they would have people come to the house and sexually assault this young girl. They worked very hard to get her on drugs, meth in particular, because if you're under the influence, you are more easy to subdue. And it was a bad situation. My client was able to get out of the situation. It was actually a sex buyer who helped her get out, because she was well aware that the traffickers were planning on killing her at some point, because she was a very verbal client. So how did she get in? Her friend recruited her in. You also have friends who will try to make it look fun, right? Oh, it's so fun. We have parties all the time. We go out. It's not that big of a deal. And look at all the things I have. My hair is done. My nail is done. I have nice clothes. All of these things can make the life look glamorized until they get in, and then it's no longer glamorized. There's also survival sex, which happens quite a bit with boys or people who are part of the LGBTQ+ community. What survival sex is somebody selling themselves for survival, for food, for drink, for shelter. There is not for glitz and glamour or for fun or for a trafficker. It is just so that I can eat and have the basic necessities. Also important to talk about internet enticement, how social media and video games and chat rooms are used. It's important that when you are with your children or children with their community, that you have conversations about internet safety. At Vanguard University, our Live to Free organization, which is student-led, they have a whole presentation on the importance of internet safety and how to utilize that. There are lots of times that people build connections and make relationships through the internet, and you may not know who you're connecting with. We actually had a case like that within my agency, and it wasn't a client, it was a staff. Her daughter was a straight A student. She was an honor student on her way to college, and someone met her on Facebook. Hey, I'm just like you. I'm really smart. Let's connect. Let's get together. Let's meet up, and let's share what it is to be like us. And I want to learn more from you. And the invite was to meet at a local university, which they did. What my colleague's daughter didn't know was the university was closed that day for break for that week. And the recruiter said, hey, I live down the street, let's just go to my house. And they did. And again, remember, my colleague's daughter had built a relationship with this person over about a month. And I know you, and you're a kid like me. And we're just, these smart kids. And let's talk about what it's like to be us and moving forward in our life and taking our next steps to college. Once my colleague's daughter got to the house, she remembered nothing else. She remembered saying, are your parents here? And the girl said, no, they're at work. They'll be here shortly. Would you like a soda? And that was it. We were able to put our forces together and call who we needed to call and put a lot of pressure in the area that we suspected she might be in. And the girl was found walking down the street one day by a bystander, saw her, who had seen the poster. And what law enforcement suspected was that they had released her because we had put so much pressure, but also that she had been drugged and she was getting ready to be transported to another location so that she too could be trafficked. I want to do an emphasis on familial trafficking because I think it is important for us to talk about that and to share about it. I'd like you to meet Shania Davis. She was 5 years old, and this particular case took place in 2009. Her mother, center person here, Antoinette Davis, sold her daughter to her ex-boyfriend / drug dealer, Mario McNeil, because mom had a $200 drug debt. And the exchange was to be, in this picture here that you see of the man carrying the child, he's carrying her into a hotel. He did sexually assault the child, and he ended up killing her as well. And all of this because mom had a substance use disorder. Mom was ill as a result of her substance use. The child died. I use this to start this discussion off because this was one of the first big cases that caught a lot of media attention. It was on Oprah when she had her show. It was all over the news because it just seemed unheard of that a parent would sell their child. It is not as uncommon as you think. The next one is Camara Holland, 5 years old. Her mother, Christy Seppel, sold her daughter to this gentleman, Jeremy Williams. This took place recent, 2021. He did sexually assault this child and he murdered this child. Mom denies any involvement. However, law enforcement thinks differently and they are awaiting trial. This one, April Cochran. She actually pleaded guilty to trafficking her 11-year-old daughter. Mom, again, had a substance abuse disorder. She was heavily addicted to heroin. And what she would do is when she ran out of money, she would send her 11-year-old daughter to her drug dealer, who was a pedophile. He enjoyed sexual engagement with children. He liked young children. And her daughter was 11. So what mom would do is dress her daughter to appear younger than 11, send her off to him. He would totally abuse and misuse this child in ways I don't even want to discuss on this presentation because it's heartbreaking, and send her back to her mom. And obviously the child would be severely traumatized by this. So mom would praise her and say, you did a wonderful job. And mom would give her a little bit of heroin. Mom provided heroin to her daughter 4 times, and each time it made her daughter very ill. Mom had pleaded guilty to this charge, and she is now serving 51 years in prison. Her daughter is in the care of family and is working towards her healing, which can take quite a while. It takes a long time, but she's working through it. This is a recent case that I found in Arizona with Brooke Santiago and Derek Newman. They were trafficking Brooke's 13-year-old daughter right here in Casa Grande, Arizona. The daughter has been placed in the child welfare system, and they are awaiting trial. But when you think about this, we are, as our parents, as our caregivers, we are not supposed to traffic our children. Our children look to us for safety. They look to us for protection and guidance and support and love and care. And parents, is or should be the first adult that a child has the opportunity to trust. So think about it. If it is your parent who is trafficking you, they are not protecting you, they are the people harming you. How do you trust anyone else in the world? How do you trust to tell someone what is happening to you? How do you even understand that it's wrong? Are you conflicted? Do you think this doesn't feel right, what's being done to me? So yes, I believe it's wrong, but my parent is the one doing it, so it can't be that wrong. So there's a lot of conflict that and turmoil that comes with that. It's important that you understand what a trafficker looks like, because a lot of times there's the stereotype. It's the guy with the shiny suit and the big hat and the cup. Not necessarily. I'd like you to meet Mr. Bedrejo. She's a teenager. She was arrested in 2016, I apologize. She was arrested in May 2016 at 16 years old and sentenced to 13 years in prison for trafficking. She was trafficking 4 young girls, ages 14 to 15. These are also some convicted traffickers. These 2 young men, they're teenagers. The 2 people you see here, they look like they could be someone's grandparent. All have been found guilty of trafficking juveniles. The couple down here was selling a juvenile to her own boyfriend so that he could have sexual relations with her. This is a very interesting case that took place a few years ago. Tayshawn and Dante Hunter. Tayshawn, the gentleman with the hat, was actually in juvenile hall for another offense. He was running the trafficking ring from juvenile hall. So he would do his weekly or daily call, and he would call his brother, and he would provide his brother instructions on what he should do. They were actually trafficking 4 teenage girls, ages, I believe it was 13 to 15. And who knew about the ring? Who knew what was happening? Their mother. She was collecting the money that was being earned from the girls being trafficking to pay for her son's defense for the original charge that he was in juvenile hall for. They got caught. Mom did not receive any charges against her, but the 2 brothers did. Unfortunately, Dante, the younger one, 15, he was found guilty. He did do his time in juvenile hall. He got out, and to have started a new life, he moved to another state where he was actually killed in a drive-by shooting that had absolutely nothing to do with him. He was an innocent victim. Let's talk about tactics to recruit. How do they do it? We talked about the coercion and control. So building that relationship with that child, promising them things, you're going to be a model, or buying them things, I'm going to make your life better, or what's wrong with your parents? Why won't they let you do whatever it is the child is wanting to do? And then they start gaining control, and that's little by little, and it might be about little things. It could be, no, you can't go to the store. I love you so much. I don't want you to go to the store by yourself. I have to go with you. Putting time limits on things as their boyfriend. Oh, you're going to go to your friend's house? Okay, you can only go there for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, and then you need to report back to me. The manipulation. The next step is to isolate. I'm going to get you away from anyone who could make you think this is wrong. I don't want you to have the ability to talk to anyone. I am going to isolate you from the life that you knew, and I'm going to bring you into mine, and I will control everything. Now, some of that can include taking identification, telling them that they can't, you don't need to talk to those people. You're more mature than your friends. Imagine telling a kid who's maybe 15 and you're promoting them, telling them how mature they are, how wonderful they are, how amazing they are. Oh, but your friends who are your age, they're just not at your level. That is something that does happen at times. They also want to change their perception and how they see things. So maybe a child is upset with their parent or parents for saying they couldn't go to a party. That might just be one incident, one party they couldn't go to, maybe because the family had another event to attend together as a family. It might come back to the fact that the trafficker will use that, oh, your parents are horrible. Why would they make you go there when you could be at the party with your friends having fun? See, I wouldn't want to be around them. They're starting to change how they perceive things. They also induce debility and exhaustion. So some of the, just as life, we have guidelines and things that we need to follow. And within the world of trafficking, they do as well. And some of those, one of those things is there's a quota that's established and set usually by the trafficker for the person that he is trafficking. And it could be that you have to make $1,200 a night. And if you don't make that $1,200, you don't get to eat, you don't get to come home, you don't get to sleep. You continue working until you make my money. I have worked with girls and boys, but girls more often who have not eaten in 24 hours because they couldn't make the quota. There wasn't that much business out. They are exhausted, they are tired. You have to think about it. In order to make whatever quota, it is not unusual for them to be sleeping with 10, 12, 15 people a night. And you have to also think about whatever that sex buyer asks you to do, you have to do. So imagine as a child having that amount of pressure, abuse, and stress put on you. You are exhausted. You don't know what to do. You are confused. And then there's threats. They'll threaten their family, they'll threaten them, and they also use threats in a different way. I worked with a girl who said to me that she was terrified to leave her trafficker because she watched him murder another girl who worked for him. Or one explained to me that one of the girls got AIDS and the trafficker would not allow her to get medical care, so they watched her die. And he would tell them, you're going to do this? Do you see what can happen if you defy me? You will end up like that. I have worked with children who were burned as a result of not complying as they needed to, or they're threatened. I know where you live. I'll go take your little sister and kill her, or your parents. So there's constantly the threat of violence or abuse or hurt or trauma that can come as a result of not being compliant with the trafficker. They degrade them and tell them they're worthless and not worth much. You're nothing to me, you're dirty. And they also feel that within themselves. Young people will feel like, or victims will feel like, I can't go home to my family, or I can't go and tell someone because I am less than, I'm degraded. And then they'll put trivial demands, like you can only use this much toilet paper, or you can only have 2 sips of water. These are not uncommon tactics that they use. I want to be clear that boys are exploited as well. We don't have as much data as we need in reference to that, but there's a lot of efforts and work to get that. And a lot of it for boys will start with what's called survival sex. And we talked about that a little bit earlier in this presentation. Survival sex is the conscious decision to survive, and is psychologically associated with the conscious decision to engage. So in order for me to survive, I have to engage in sex trafficking. You'll find that a lot in the LGBTQ plus community, but also with runaways. People have run away from home, in particular males. They get out there and it's not what they think it's going to be, life away from home. Or maybe home life was so bad and so abusive and they couldn't figure out a way to get help, or help didn't respond as it needed to. It's better, I'll do better living on the street. But after you go 3-4 days hungry, that may become the only option that you may think is available to you so that you can survive. Let's talk about what puts children at risk. Socioeconomic factors are a big one, and especially in communities where there are lack of resources and where there is poor financial income for families. You will find, and in doing some research and spending the last week on Navajo Nation, just being lucky and blessed enough to meet with some amazing people and take in some information and some knowledge, there are some areas where socioeconomic factors play a big part, where you might have people who are without electricity, without water, they're trying to get food. So that can play a part in any community, and I want to be clear. Where if you don't have your basic needs met, it may not be uncommon to sell a child for a sexual engagement to get your basic needs met. It is important that we take care of our socioeconomic factors. Environmental factors: what is the house you live in? What is the community you live in? That can also place a higher risk of children being put at risk for sexual exploitation. What's the environment you live in? Is the environment where you're raised in a culture that raises you up to be a trafficker? Is your living environment one that is okay with selling oneself for items or for money? Is your environmental factor filled with abuse? Are you abused? Are you unbelieved? Are you unheard in your home? That plays a huge factor in children being at risk for trafficking. Sociological factors: mental health challenges. History of abuse we found to be one of the biggest. Again, as I said previously, if someone is already abusing you, is it that much different for someone else to do it? Does it feel different? Do you think, okay, well, I'm doing this over here, but at least I'm getting money? So those are factors that play into it as well. And homelessness, again, lack of basic needs can put a child at risk for trafficking. What do we look for? Unexplained absences from school. Do you see a child who's not at school often, or all of a sudden they're not there? Do you see a child in your world, whether it's your own child, whether it's other children in your community, who seem to have items that they can't explain? Newer clothes, new phones, gaming systems, where are they coming from? Those are questions that you need to ask. Do you think about, do they have new phones and electronics? Are they engaging with peers you haven't seen them engage with before? Do the people in your life, the kids, talk about having a new relationship with someone you don't know about or you haven't met, and they don't feel comfortable introducing you to them? That's a big red flag. Do you see a change in their regular behavior? It is extremely important that you know a child's baseline behavior, meaning what is their day-to-day? How do they behave day-to-day? If you see that changing, that's a huge red flag and you need to ask some questions. Listen for language. I usually have a language sheet that I distribute of words, but I think those words could possibly be different within Navajo Nation. And so I want to work on some kind of gathering that, but there's specific language that is used within the trafficking community. For example, the traffickers often call it daddy. So if you hear that word, ask the person, is it your dad? They will call the other girls involved under that trafficker my sister or my wife. Or do you hear the word bottom bitch? That's a red flag word you need to be paying attention to, because that means that is the trafficker's number one person involved in their ring who's responsible for trafficking. So just listen if you see a change in language, or if you don't understand something the kids in your environment are saying to you, ask them what it means. I do it all the time to my daughter. I don't understand something she says. I ask her, I'm sorry, what does that mean? Do you see a child who's alone a lot? Maybe at social groups, community centers, family homes, are they just by themselves a lot? That child is highly vulnerable for being targeted for trafficking because traffickers think no one is watching. They see that vulnerability. There's also been an increase in children who have developmentally delayed or they have special needs. So how do we work with that as well? We need to reach out. I don't want you to think this is hopeless, because it is not. There are so many things that you can do in this fight against trafficking. And the number one thing you can do is work towards prevention. That is the biggest thing you can do. That's what this conference is for. That is what your amazing First Lady is about. Prevention, strengthening the family unit, strengthening the community unit, because that is your number one fight against trafficking. You, as the parent, as the person, grandparent, aunt, uncle, as the community, you are the number one protection against trafficking. Simply your presence. If a trafficker sees that a child has people in their life that are present, that are around them, that is the child they don't want. It is going to be too hard and require too much work for that trafficker to get that child away to where they need them to go. And I like to use this example because it's so simple, but it really proves the point. I have a daughter. She graduated high school about 3 years ago. But during her senior year, there was a young man who was showing interest in her. And so they had started to kind of talk, and he had said he was trying to ask her on a date. And he said, you know, the basketball games are on. What if I come to your house and we watch the game together? And my daughter said, that would be okay. And the gentleman said, oh, wait a minute, wait, I'm scared of your mom. I'm scared of your mom, so I don't know if that's a good idea. Now, I should say I'm not a very big person. I'm 5'1". I don't know why he was scared of me, but I do know why. Because I was very active at my daughter's school. I was on the PTA. I volunteered a lot. I would be at the school when she didn't know I was at the school. Her friends would go, oh, we saw your mom at the bake sale, or oh, we saw your mom, here or there. It wasn't to just spy on her. I just think it's important to be active in your child's life. I have to say, I didn't know this young man. I had never met him. It wasn't a very big school, but he clearly knew who I was. And it was my presence that let him know, okay, this young woman I'm interested in. There's someone in her life who is present. And he didn't come to our home, but he was welcome. And it turned out that he probably didn't, because he was trying to talk to multiple girls at the school. But the point I'm making is I had never met him. I had never spoken to him, but he had seen me and he knew that my daughter had someone who was present. So he moved on his way. And that is important. Encourage the kids in your life to engage in positive activities or positive cultural experiences. I've had the privilege and pleasure to spend the last week at Navajo Nation, and I got to tell you, it was amazing and a life-changing experience. Again, I met some of the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life, and the warmth and the welcome and the explanation and discussion that I got to engage in about the Navajo traditions. Use that to bring kids in, to make them feel a part and make them feel special. That's empowering for them. If you can identify something really amazing about a child, maybe they sing, they dance, or they're wonderful basket weavers, or they just have amazing talents, pour into that, encourage that, because that empowers them to do better. In many cultures, children are not allowed to say no. It's do what I say. We've got to change that. We've got to teach our children that it is okay to say no, but we need to teach them how to say no. And what does that look like? Maybe I know in my family culture, and I learned in Navajo, there's a great deal of respect for your elders. And sometimes you might say, oh, so-and-so, go and hug your uncle. Maybe the child doesn't want to do that and they're uncomfortable. As the parent, we need to teach them to say, Uncle so-and-so, it's so nice to meet you, and extend their hand for a handshake. And they can say, I'm so glad you're here, but I really would feel uncomfortable hugging or kissing you or sitting on your lap. If we empower that child to learn how to say no appropriately and effectively, they're going to be able to say no to someone outside the family. They're going to be able to say no to that trafficker who tries to approach them. So important that we do that. If a child tells you that something has happened to them I need you to believe them. It is our responsibility to believe what they say, even when it is hard for us to accept. If I had 5 cents for every client I have worked with over the last 17 years who has explained to me that they told their mom or their dad or their grandma or their teacher that they were being abused, and the person elected not to believe them, I would be rich. It turns out they were right. Even if you question what they're telling you, you do not let that child know you question them. You believe them. I believe you, and I'm going to take action. You report it to authorities and you allow them to investigate. And if it turns out that it wasn't true, it is better to apologize to the person who's been accused than to have your child traumatized because you made the mistake of not believing them. I'd rather apologize and lose a relationship or a friendship than not believe my daughter. And my daughter has always been raised to know, if you tell mommy, I believe you, because I had to create an environment where she felt comfortable being able to tell me. Maintain regular communication. This is one of the easiest things you can do. As parents, we're busy. We have a lot going on. But maybe we can have dinner together. Maybe we can have breakfast together. Maybe we can go for a walk on the weekend. Maybe we can wash dishes together. What is a simple task that you can do together where you can have conversations with your child about anything? It doesn't matter. You just want to keep communication lines open so that child feels comfortable speaking to you, talking to you, and engaging with you. If you can, this is an area of weakness for me. I'm not a technological person, but I do have Instagram, and the point is I've used it to watch my daughter and her friends. I'm going to be honest, and I was able to do that. Learn social media, discuss the dangers that can occur with sexting, that can occur with someone trying to solicit you, someone trying to communicate you in a way that you're uncomfortable. Learn it as much as you can, and also build your village. That's what I call it, building your village. Who in your life and in your community can help support you in raising this child? And who can you support in raising their child? We have to come together because you may not know Snapchat, but your neighbor might, and then you guys can work together. I have Instagram, my sister has Snapchat, and we work together in monitoring what's happening with my daughter. Some information that we have been found: children with involved parents have enhanced skill for regulating emotion and feel negative emotions less often. If you are, again, communicating and involved with your child in any way possible, they learn how to monitor their emotions, which also helps them process those emotions and be able to communicate what they're feeling. They can communicate if they feel violated. They can communicate if somebody is disrespecting them. They can communicate if someone has approached them, which makes them be able to communicate with you and helps keep them out of danger. Also, children with involved parents have lower rates of substance use and delinquent acts. You're involved, they're less likely to need to engage in these things because they know my parent is present. Also, educate yourself, your family, your coworkers, your community, your faith-based communities. Again, build your village, build your social circle, and never stop talking about trafficking and what can happen. Here's why. You never know what someone is thinking. You never know, you might be somewhere talking about what you learned at this conference, and someone may overhear you, and it could be a man who was considering purchasing a human being, and he might put the brakes on that because he heard your conversation. And now, wait, maybe I need to rethink my positioning, or no, wait, maybe I don't want to get caught. I don't want to get in trouble, or maybe I feel that this is wrong and this is something I don't need to do. Conversating and communicating is important. Create and maintain engaging activities that keep children busy and develop their self-esteem. One of the things, again, I learned, there are so many beautiful traditions and cultural experiences within the Navajo community. Bring your kids in as much as you can. Teach them that, because that's going to empower them and build that self-esteem. Traffickers don't want someone with strong self-esteem. It's too much work. Provide a loving, supportive, and non-judgmental environment. As parents, we have our way of thinking And what we would like to happen, we've got to do something different. I had the privilege of meeting Miss NAVAJO 2021, 2022. And she said one of the most impactful things I think I heard. She said, children are not meant to be molded. They are meant to be unfolded. And I asked her if I could use that in this training, and she gave me permission. They're not to be what we want them to be. They're to be who they are. And we are to help them unfold all the beauty that is within them. And that can only be done when we're not judging, when we're loving, and when we're supportive. You create that environment, your child is more likely to talk to you about what's happening, not just to you, but to the other children and their friends in their life, which gives you power and opportunity to help them as well. Always remind your child that they're more than good enough. Identify at least one amazing thing that is just absolutely the best thing about them ever. Are they smart? Are they creative? Are they talented? Do they do well in STEM? Do they do well in the sciences? Identify something that is amazing about them. That makes them feel valued in a way that a trafficker can't. It makes them feel empowered, and it makes them work harder towards that thing you've identified. Always let them know they're special. These are a few resources that you can use that may be helpful to you. So I want to make sure that I put that out there. The National Trafficking Resource Center hotline, that's important. The Polaris Project, the Trafficking in Persons report is a wealth of information. The Vanguard University Ending Human Trafficking podcast, the Child Abuse Hotline for Arizona, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And I also want you to know that your government, your nation is doing some wonderful work in ways to prevent and fight trafficking. They have established laws, they have established resources, they have established supportive services for victims, and they're continuing to work in that. Reach out to your local chapter house, reach out to your local law enforcement. They should be able to direct you in the way to the support that you need. If you are experiencing this, or you know someone who is, there is no way that you have to suffer in silence. You can move forward. There's nothing to be ashamed of. This is a crime. This is not a victimless crime. This is abuse. And you have the right to be helped, healed, and supported. And Navajo Nation is ready to prepare you to do that. Vanguard University, we are prepared to help you do that. Thank you I think I'm out of my time. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am grateful. I have put my contact information up here. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to put them up on Sketch. I will do my best. I will answer them. I won't do my best. I will answer them. And again, thank you so much for your time. It is so appreciated, and have the most amazing day today.